I like the sentiment. We're going to do it old school. We're not going to use the transfer portal.
Cinnamon, hot cinnamon.
But it's not going to work. Like, again, if you're cool with every 3 to 4 years hoping you can keep a class together, like, it's just not going to work. I don't think it's feasible. I think Dabo's making a huge mistake, but he's dying on the hill he said he'd die on.
Yes, he is.
He's
going to run down that hill, too.
Yes.
Okay?
Goofy-ass run.
I love Dabo Swinney. Coach, I love you. I would love to play for this guy. I'd love my son to play for this guy. Problem is, I'd love the coach of his rival team as well. I'm Shane Beamer fan.
Well.
Is his refusal to use the transfer portal going to be his downfall? Maybe. Is it going to make me root for him even harder? Yes, it is, okay? He's borderline going to make me become a Clemson fan, to be honest. And did you see what he came out and said about the potential of eliminating walk-ons? So he was asked about, hey, with the roster limitations and potentially eliminating walk-on players, which he was a walk-on wide receiver at Alabama, he said, I literally just heard that for the first time the other day, and I can say it's probably the worst thing I've heard since 1988. Of everything that's happened in my entire career, that's the worst thing I've ever heard. I love this guy.
What did he hear in 1988?
Yeah, you don't want to know.
Yeah, it's tough.
Said, hey, you want to know about this island?
That was a year after I was.
Said, you want to go hang out at this island?
Yeah.
Now, and again, I don't want people to get confused. I'm not saying that you need to build the whole team out of the transfer portal, but you do need to use it to supplement your roster to plug holes in the ship. You don't build your whole ship out of it. I just think going all the way to one end of the spectrum where you're like, you know what? We're going to Colorado this thing. We're just going to turn our team into the transfer portal. I don't think that's going to work. But then on the other end of the spectrum, we're not going to use it at all. I don't think that's going to work. It reminds me, and yes, David, it is cool. Just like, you know what? I like going back and watching a black and white movie every now and then. But you know what it's not as cool as? Doom 2 or The Dark Knight. Like, I'm not...
That's your personal opinion.
Listen.
It's great. I'm glad
you watch Paper
Listen,
Moon.
Citizen Kane, legendary movie, right? Movie that changed the time. I would much rather watch The Matrix than go back and watch that.
The Chosen One. I will say this.
But you want a museum, though.
I want a Hall of Fame.
David. I will say this. When it comes to the transfer portal, I think it's either used to plug holes in the ship or add icing on top of the cake. I don't feel like you have to go there if you don't need to. It's something where it's open for your choice. But I will say this. Where's the last time Clemson's had a good skill position come out the last season?
That's what, if you look at the bouncing balls,
it's like, it's cool. No, like, and I get it. Like, you want guys who've wanted it to be Clemson for a while. And you need guys like that on your team. But I do think to keep up to the Clemson standard, the last guy you had come out was 2021 with Justin Ross, who had 500 yards. So something's got to change. It's cool.
Did he transfer there?
It's cool. Justin Ross?
No.
So all the guys that we've talked about before, they're skill position guys that they've had who have been elite and who are playing in the NFL. They recruited those guys. Those guys didn't come in via the transfer.
They're not going to come now.
Why not?
Because those are an elite athletes, an elite 5-star athlete. You're going to have to pay them. Whether it's out of the transfer portal.
I didn't know we were.
You're going to have to fix something because the guys, you're not getting T. Higgins anymore. Where's T. Higgins? He's not running around Clemson. The guys you're picking right now are mediocre athletes.
Well, and nobody's saying, again, I'm not saying that all of a sudden Clemson just going to be 5-7 every year. But if you are in today's game, right, by not using the transfer portal at all, and again, I'm not saying build the whole team out of it. I'm saying a couple guys here and there, we've seen it. We see the top teams do it, right? The teams that have been able to stay at the top lately. You got Georgia and Alabama. You go through it. All these guys. So Kirby Smart is wrong. Nick Saban is wrong. Steve Sarkisian is wrong. Ryan Day is wrong. And I agree with Josh Pate when he talks about Michigan being the last team that has truly developed from high school all the way through, that stayed together, that did it the old school way. Again, not that you can't do it for 75% of the team. Not saying that Clemson won't get good players. They're going to pay guys NIL. I'm not talking about NIL. But through the transfer portal, it is a way to bring in guys who have that unteachable intangible already that don't have to go through that development process typically, right? Maybe you're down a little bit at wide receiver or DB. Maybe you need a couple tight ends. Going out and getting those guys, it gives you the opportunity to supplement your roster year over year instead of having to go back to square one and deal with it. Because again, remember, Clemson is losing players to the transfer portal. That's another angle of this.
That's a bigger point.
You have more going out than you do coming in.
They lost
so
12 this past.
I just feel like if you're going to go back and say we're going to grow our own food, you better hope the weather's good. Yeah, like a lot has to go right for you to be able to recreate this year after year after year after year. I just think he's pushing all his chips to the middle of the table, and he's got a 4 and a 2. And he's like, all right, we're going to ride this thing. I hope I hit something good on the river. That's what it looks like to me. That's what it looks like to me. Phone line's open, 7:15 a.m. Central. I don't know why I enjoy saying that so much at the end while throwing the paper. If you notice, I just do those things. But let's get to the Booster Club. Let's hear them yell at me about Clemson.
All right, Booster Club, hit that like, hit that subscribe button. If you don't, it's on topic. It will get read. We're going to start off with a Big Ten guy.
Oh, good.
Said, would Clemson benefit by moving to the SEC or Big Ten over ACC? Like you guys have said in the past, the ACC is dying.
Yeah, well, if you saw the North Carolina trustee, it's like old man yells at cloud. Rich guy says wants to get richer at North Carolina. I think the ACC is on their way out. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. To me, overall, when I look at the Big Ten and the SEC, they're both really, really tough. Again, I think we are somewhat splitting hairs here now that the Big Ten has added, Oregon and Washington. They've added more depth to the conference. I think Clemson being in the SEC footprint, I think that would do them better. But again, if you're not going to use the transfer portal, if you're going to cut off one resource, pumping into your program, it's going to put you behind the 8 ball either way, whether it's the Big Ten or it's the SEC. I'm just wondering, because I like to look ahead. This feels like one of those situations where if it does go downhill for Dabo, and Dabo and Clemson do part ways because this doesn't work, it almost feels like the sheltered child who goes nuts in college syndrome. Oh, we didn't use the transfer portal for 3 years. New coach comes in, totally opposite approach, right? The last one didn't work. Oh, we sheltered the kid, now they go to college. Why did it turn into a Project X party at the freshman dorm with my son leading the charge, which is probably what's going to happen. So I think there's a lot of ramifications down the road. But as far as Big Ten and SEC, I mean, it's going to be tough sledding either way, in my opinion.
All right, let's go to Hopeful Husker, #AskTheBuzz. When I look at their schedule, it doesn't look like the hardest. What is the ceiling for the Fighting Dabos this year? The hardest games are fairly early in their schedule. Got their schedule pulled up right now. All right, week 1. Damn. Got Georgia.
Not a good start. Not a good start.
Week 2, you fight the Cone's Menaces, Cone's biggest enemy in App State.
Not a walk in the park, especially after you play Georgia. It's gonna look like
then you got NC State at home.
Okay.
All right. Then you have Stanford at home. Terrible.
By the way, remember, NC State has Grayson McCall, I believe, this year. Coastal Carolina quarterback. Go ahead.
All right. Then you go to the Fighting Mike Norvells, DJU.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. This schedule kind of sucks so far. At Florida State, so you got Georgia and at Florida State in the first 4 games.
5.
Huh.
Then you go to Wake. All right. Then you got Virginia at home.
Okay.
Then Louisville at home. At Virginia Tech.
Okay.
At Pittsburgh. I can't wait to get your Pittsburgh take this year. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. They were gonna throw me off a building.
Yeah.
Until they saw their team played and then realized.
Then you have the Citadel at home, and then the Blind fight the Blind in South Carolina.
So no Notre Dame this year.
No Notre Dame.
No Notre Dame.
Okay.
And again, I'm not saying Clemson is going to go 4-8. Like they could go 9-3 this year. I'm looking at the long term. This is the long term play. All right, that's what I'm looking at. I don't think it's sustainable. The difference in this and the Big Short, Christian Bale was right. The housing market, Christian Bale was actually right. Everybody else was wrong. In this instance, I don't think everybody else is wrong, right? I think Dabo is wrong for being on one total end of the spectrum. I want to be a little bit in the middle. What does Blaine say? You want to keep it what?
Yeah, keep it
Yeah.
So no Miami on that schedule either.
Mm-mm.
That's interesting.
But it is top heavy. Again, we'll see how South Carolina is at the end. Long term. My investment, I don't even look right now. I give my financial investment guy, hey, go get it. I'm going to look at it in 6 months, and then we're going to judge you then. I'm not looking at every day going up and down, like, oh, what did the NASDAQ do? What did this do? This, that, and the other. No, I'm looking at long term. So I'm a Clemson fan. I'm worried about the long-term diagnosis of Dabo being so damn stubborn.
AMC, I'm not leaving. All right, let's go to John Ray. Says, if Dabo's in trouble this year, then who would be best fitted to replace him? Is this Deion's big brand opportunity?
No. You want to talk about going?
Yeah.
You want to talk about polar
Deion to
opposite?
Clemson?
You want to talk about polar opposite? Again, this year, I don't think it's going to be a disaster for Clemson. I think this year could be better than last year. I don't think that's a crazy thing to put out into the realm. But over the next 3 to 40 years, I don't see this working at the level that, because again, Clemson views himself as here now, and they should. It's been a great run for Clemson. They have elevated themselves. They went from the duplex to the suburbs to an estate with a pool and a gate. They don't want to go back, right? What did Dave Chappelle say on one of his skits? It's like, tell him Leonard Washington made it out. I don't know what they do. I heard they sell rocks, and then he drives off. Clemson does not want to go back to that lifestyle. I feel like this is going to bring them back to mid. And then every now and then, you're not going to be able to keep it at that standard.
This is the guy who set the standard. You know, it's different than at Alabama.
That's what makes it
Nick
tougher.
Saban blew it out of the water for Alabama, but it was still Alabama. You still had Bear Bryant. I mean, what do you mean?
Like when you set the standard, like if you're not willing, you're the guy that did it.
You're the guy that did it.
You're the guy that did it. So you have a ton of equity built up. But we've seen this before. Like, yeah, like this is what made like Gus Malzahn at Auburn so hard. Because Gus Malzahn got Auburn back to where it felt like they should have been after it fell apart. I don't know if he did.
Gene Chizik won the national championship.
In 2010, Cam Newton won the national championship. And you got to give Gene credit. But Auburn went 3-9 2 years later. So it totally fell off the cliff. Clemson hasn't totally fallen off the cliff. I'm talking about one season.
I'm talking about my entire life growing up. Clemson, to me, was nothing at football. Nothing at football.
Every now and then they'd have...
Then they go toe-to-toe with Alabama in national championships.
Agreed.
And they win 2 of them.
Agreed.
Dabo did that.
Agreed.
And that doesn't mean that he's not being stubborn and that his new tactics are going to have a downfall. I can get behind that. I'm just saying... Be careful before you get rid of the guy who set the standard at the same time when you're already in one of the conferences who's kind of sliding off on the wayside.
I totally agree with that.
You might go back to irrelevancy real quick.
I totally agree with that. But what if you get caught in the position of, hey, the guy who got us here, it is slipping and he's not willing to change.
Well, if it's slipping, that's why you need a great AD to make that decision. To me, slipping is not 13 straight seasons of double-digit wins, and the only one that wasn't was a 9-win season.
Again, when was that 9-win season?
This past year.
So if it goes 8-9 wins again, that's the one downside of elevating yourself to that standard. Now you're beholden to that, right? Now that is the norm. That's what the fans want. That's what all this money that's been pumped in here to build this new facility and put that big ass slide in the building, that's what people are used to. So the minute that it starts going down and you look at the main reason of, oh, you're not changing with the game, I use the Nick Saban example again. If you want to keep a dynasty going, you have to be able to evolve when you're at the top. The game has changed so much from when Dabo was doing that. I think we can look at college football and say, man, this is turning into a totally different product, at least the inner workings of it, to when Dabo got it there. So if you're not willing to change and then it's 9-win season, 8-win season, 8-win season, that makes it so much harder at the end because he was the one that elevated.
I'll give you another example. Jim Harbaugh went 2-4 during the COVID year at Michigan. They had every right to move off from Jim Harbaugh and just say, hey, you were an All-American quarterback here for Bo Schembechler. It's just not working. You're not beating your rival. You're not doing good enough. Then he went 43-3 the next
year. And let's not forget, what did they do? They went in there and said, we need some of that money back. And they did the same thing that Nebraska did with Scott Frost. And then Jim Harbaugh did. Jim Harbaugh came out of it. But the question becomes, the way that Jim Harbaugh did it, right? Do you think that's still feasible, being able to develop? Because again, I think the guys like Blake Corum and those guys up front, I think Michigan had just a different type of dude. And Michigan had been there, almost got there. So they had that chip on their shoulder coming back each year, and then they finally broke through. I'm going to be interested to see if that can be recreated again. But I mean, even Michigan used the transfer portal.
They got transfers.
Yeah. So it's an interesting conversation. And if you're a Clemson fan, I'd like to know what you think about it because it is pretty interesting.
It's good to see you, Travis, 75. He said Dabo has never said he will not use the transfer portal. He said it has to be the right person for the right reason. Loyalty means something.
I agree.
Since the portal is so wonderful, tell me the perfect pick that Clemson turned down that it would have fixed their problems. It's not a grocery store when you get to pick what you want. Both parties have to agree.
Yeah, we say on the show all the time, you can only get what the market bears. Nobody's arguing that. And just like recruiting cycles, just like draft cycles, sometimes there are position groups that have better players in the portal than others. That's not the argument. But I'm looking at Clemson right now. They sure could have used a wide receiver. They sure could have used a skill position guy to help Cade, especially losing Will Shipley and some of these other guys. I'm just saying, and nobody's saying that loyalty is a bad thing. Not at all.
Yeah.
I love it. And I'm not saying Dabo's came out and said the transfer portal's the devil like he's Bobby Boucher's mother. But I am judging you by your actions. I am judging you on what you do. And Dabo has said he does not really like the transfer portal. He's not the biggest fan in the world of the way that college football is changing. And I agree with him to some extent. But at some point, your ass is winning 8 games. This argument you're giving me right now, it's not going to matter. It's going to turn into, all right, what do we got to do to get back to being able to compete with Alabama and Georgia? Georgia beats you by 45 to open the season. I'm not going to be hearing a bunch of, loyalty, we should have gone in here and done it this way and done it that way. It's easy to say it now. And again, I hope I'm wrong. I hope Dabo's right and it turns college football back into the loyalty test. But I don't think that's where we're going. I really don't believe
Everybody has a plan until they play Georgia.
That's,
all right, $2 donation from
Oregon.
Steve's Trading Card Frenzy. If you don't adapt, you attract. Clemson equals trouble.
I hate to say it, but it's like we say, it's just, I want to make everybody happy and sell ice cream for a living. What's up, YouTube? Hey, do us a favor. If you hadn't, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Keep sharing the show. We really appreciate it.